In this video, we will be taking a look at the meaning of the word collocate and breaking down the first of its two meanings, that of location. In our following second video, which we'll be uploading next week, we will delve into collocation's other meaning, which relates to context. Finally, in our third video, we'll be looking at how you can incorporate collocations into your language studies and improving your language learning efficiency and effectiveness. The human brain is very good at noticing things. Take my significant other, for example. It literally takes her 1 second to notice all the things I've forgotten to put back in their place, like the towel, which I was sure was kept on the bathroom floor, or the table mats, which should by definition be kept on the table. What I mean is that the brain is very good at noticing patterns, noticing when something is not quite right or is slightly out of place. This ability to recognize patterns which we see over and over again is actually something which some language teachers ignore and many language learners don't see as important as they pore over their grammar books wondering why they haven't learned Spanish yet. Pattern recognition is what is really at the heart of collocations. Let's start by taking a look at the word collocate, which is where the word collocation comes from. We can see that it is made up of two parts, col and locate. Col means jointly or together, and locate means to be in the same place or context. So from this, we can get two base meanings. Firstly, two things that are in the same place, and secondly, two things that exist in the same context. Now, these meanings are very abstract, and I can imagine that so far they don't seem very helpful for learning a language, or anything for that matter. So what I will do now is break these meanings down and show what they mean from the standpoint of language. So we will now look at the first meaning of location. The best way to show the concept of collocations is to ask you two very simple questions. I'm going to give you two incomplete sentences, and all I want you to do is think about which word you would use to complete the sentences. The first sentence is a cup of, a cup of. Which word would you use to complete this sentence? The second sentence is a glass of, a glass of. Which word would you use to complete this sentence? So we now have two sentences, a glass of and a cup of, plus the word you chose to complete each. Now, let's look at the answers from a grammatical point of view. Technically, we can complete these sentences with almost any word, such as a cup of bread or a glass of acid. But you know what? I don't think these are good enough. I think that we could be much more metaphorical or abstract. So how about a cup of depression and a glass of happiness? There you go. We now have 4 sentences, which from a structural or grammatical point of view are pretty good. We have a cup of bread, a glass of acid, a cup of depression, and finally, a glass of happiness. Perfect. Job done. Well, no. Now, are these sentences actually good sentences? I'm sure that we can come up with some situation where these sentences would be used, such as a cup of bread. Perhaps my aunt is getting a little forgetful nowadays and has started serving her morning toast in her finest china. Or perhaps Walter White always forgot to order the vials he needed and actually ended up storing the acid for his latest batch of meth in some glassware he purchased from Walmart. So as you can see, given any sentence, we can find a situation in which it could be used. But I'm going to suggest that most native speakers of English would most likely have given a different set of answers. I'm going to suggest that the most likely answers would have been something along the lines of a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and a glass of wine, a glass of water, or maybe a glass of milk. So, when we are confronted with a sentence that is given out of context, like the questions a glass of and a cup of, which were given without any situational backstory, native speakers will default to certain words and answers. You may have given a different answer from tea or wine, for example, but I strongly suspect that most will have given the words I have suggested. There are, I am sure, a whole host of reasons for this shared collective use of language, from the socio-linguistic aspects of culture and shared normative values, etc., etc. But really, so what? It does not change the fact that most native speakers will give certain answers most of the time. And this is really the heart of collocations. It is the probability of one word or words being used with another word or words. In an academic sense, a collocation is a p-value, or probability, that one word will occur in the same clause or sentence as another. But is this really helpful for learning English or Spanish, or any other language for that matter? So let's break collocations down in a useful way. In the sentence, a cup of coffee, there are 4 words, but the main 2 words are cup and coffee. When reading or listening to English, you will hear the words cup and coffee in the same sentence quite often. For example, when someone is making a drink or discussing what they had for breakfast at their hotel, or maybe even deciding what they should offer the important client that is arriving in 5 minutes. The words cup and coffee will occur much more often than the words cup and bread or cup and depression. And the same is true for the sentence a glass of. You will hear a glass of wine or a glass of water infinitely more often than you will hear or read a glass of acid. So, words that collocate mean they are more likely to be used together in a sentence, or more correctly, words with high collocation are more likely to be used together than words with low collocation. Let me give you one final example. The words bicycle and tyre, I am sure, will have good collocation, such as in the sentence, I need to fix the tyre on my bicycle. Whereas bicycle and cyclops, not so much so. I can't remember reading the phrase, and then the cyclops rode off into the sunset on his bicycle, which of course may exist somewhere, but it isn't exactly a common ending to any famous books. However, I am sure you will be able to find it somewhere. I think this would be a good time to mention some resources that are available for learners concerning collocations. In fact, there are a plethora of resources available for looking up common collocations. There are even books stuffed full of collocations and related exercises. I will start by mentioning some collocational dictionaries that are available. I will give the links in the description below. There is the printed book from Oxford University Press called Oxford Collocations Dictionary for Students of English. Also, there is the online resource Word Reference, English Collocations. I suggest having a quick look at these, particularly Word Reference, so you can have a better idea of the common collocations. Perhaps look up the words glass and cup. I would also like to mention Cambridge English Corpus, which is a database of English words which show things like how often a particular word is used, also known as a word's frequency, and where the word is used, also known as a word's range. This forms the basis of many English exams, such as the CAE and CPE, and I will be taking a closer look at these in the following 2 collocational videos. As for other languages, there's a resource, for example, for Spanish, which is called the DICE, or Diccionario de Collocaciones del Español. Again, I will give a reference in the description below. This video is getting long enough, and we have only looked at the first meaning of collocations, and have not even begun to touch on its meaning in relation to context, or how language learners can use collocations to further improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their studies. So I think this would be a good time to recap on the things that we've seen so far and deal with everything else in our up-and-coming videos over the following weeks. So to review, this is the first in a mini-series exploring and explaining collocations and showing how they can be used to help learners of English, Spanish, and any other second language. Patterns are everywhere, and our brains are good at noticing recurring patterns. As patterns form the fundamental basis of collocations, they're an effective method to incorporate into your language learning routine. The word collocation comes from the word collocate. Collocate itself is made up of col and location. Col means jointly or together, and location means space or context. So we can draw two definitions from this. Definition 1 is that two things are in the same space, and the second definition is that two things are in the same context. From this, we went on to look at the first definition of space. From a technical perspective, phrases and words can be put together in uncommon ways, such as a cup of bread or a glass of acid. However, native speakers have a tendency to put words together, such as a cup of coffee and a glass of wine. Collocations are just a way of measuring how likely it is that two or more words will occur in the same space, or in the same clause or same sentence. There are resources available giving common collocations. Please see the descriptions below. This brings us to the end of our first video, exploring and explaining the world of collocations. In our next video, we will be taking a look at the second definition, that of context. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.